December 21, 1990, 8 Millwood, Georgia. A small town where time seemed to stand still. On this cold winter morning, the silence was almost heavy, as if the forest itself was holding its breath. For most people it was just another day, but for one man it would become a moment he would never forget. A moment that would uncover a darkness. At first he thought it was nothing, just a piece of trash someone had tossed out. But as he slowed down, curiosity got the better of him. There, in the underbrush, sat an old television console. Its wooden frame was cracked and weathered, the kind of relic you'd expect to find in someone's attic, not abandoned in the middle of nowhere. As he got closer, he noticed something strange. A suitcase, sealed haphazardly with concrete, sitting inside the console. It didn't make sense. Why go through the trouble of hiding a suitcase like this? His gut told him something wasn't right. But despite the unease creeping over him, he couldn't walk away. He had to know what was inside. What he found would haunt him for the rest of his life. Wrapped in a brown blanket were the decomposed remains of a young girl. Her small body, hidden so deliberately, told a story of pain and betrayal, a story that no one had wanted to hear. Someone had gone to great lengths to erase her existence, to silence her forever. But the truth had a way of breaking through. You were in the driver's shoes. Would you have stopped? Could you have handled the weight of what you found? Or would the fear have been too much to bear? Let us know how you'd react. Kenyatta Odom was born in 1983 in Albany, Georgia, a small but close-knit community where everyone seemed to know each other. To those who knew her, she was a bright and playful child, full of curiosity and life. Her neighbors remembered her as the little girl who loved running barefoot in the yard, her giggles lighting up the quiet street. But behind the laughter, there was another story. One that few were aware of and even fewer dared to confront. What should have been a safe haven for Kenyatta was anything but. While her world seemed ordinary to those on the outside, the reality within her home was much darker. Behind closed doors, Kenyatta faced neglect and abuse that no child should ever endure. The very people who were meant to protect her, her own family, became the ones who would ultimately betray her in the most devastating way. They needed movement. Kenyatta's world was small. Her days revolved around her family and her immediate surroundings. She never traveled far, never knew what life outside her home might hold. For her, the boundaries of her life were drawn by those around her, boundaries that became a prison, locking her into a cycle of pain and silence. And in the end, that silence would cost her everything. The warning signs were there, hidden in plain sight. Kenyatta's world was filled with small, almost imperceptible cracks. Bruises that were explained away, tears that no one asked about, and a growing quietness that no one questioned. The community around her didn't know, or perhaps didn't want to know, the truth about what was happening behind those doors. For years her life and her pain were erased, forgotten by the very systems meant to protect her. Kenyatta became a statistic, a nameless victim in a world that failed to notice her cries for help. But even in death, her story refused to stay buried. And now, after decades of silence, we finally know her name. Kenyatta Odom was not just a mystery to solve. She was a child with a story, a life and a voice that deserved to be heard. How does it feel to know that a child like Kenyatta was forgotten for so long? Could more have been done to save her? And what can we as a society do to ensure no child ever slips through the cracks again? And how Kenyatta's life ended so tragically, we must first go back to the beginning. Back to the lives of the people who were meant to protect her but ultimately became her greatest threat. Evelyn Odom, Kenyatta's mother, and Ulysses Sanders, Evelyn's boyfriend, were not born into the darkness they later carried. Evelyn Odom grew up in a household ruled by chaos. Born into poverty, her childhood was defined by instability and conflict. Love and stability, things every child needs, were often replaced by harsh words and cold indifference. Arguments were frequent, and when they weren't, there was silence. A silence that left a young Evelyn feeling isolated and unseen. School, too, was a place of struggle. Evelyn was quiet, withdrawn, and often overlooked. She didn't excel academically, but the greater burden was the emotional one she carried. The feeling that she didn't matter, that her voice wasn't important. It was a belief that would follow her into adulthood. By the time Evelyn became a mother, she was already carrying the weight of her past. She lacked the tools and the emotional stability to create the nurturing environment Kenyatta needed. What she had learned growing up, survival through detachment and avoidance, became the way she parented. Kenyatta's cries were often met with frustration, her needs neglected. And as Evelyn's struggles deepened, her ability to care for her daughter slipped further away. Unlike Evelyn, Ulysses Sanders' life was defined by a harsher, more immediate violence. Growing up in Albany during the 1970s and 80s, Ulysses learned early that the world wasn't kind. His home life was chaotic, but it was the streets where he truly found himself. Petty crimes, fights, and dangerous influences became his education, teaching him that survival meant being stronger and crueler than everyone else. By the time Ulysses reached adulthood, the lessons of his youth had hardened him. Violence became second nature, anger his default response to every challenge. He drifted from place to place, job to job, never finding stability, never really trying to. And when he crossed paths with Evelyn, his life took a darker turn. One that would eventually ensnare Kenyatta as well. When Evelyn Ulster met, it was like two broken pieces trying to fit together. They were drawn to each other's pain, each seeing in the other a reflection of their own struggles. But what started as a shared understanding quickly turned toxic. Together they created a household that was anything but safe. Ulysses' temper and Evelyn's detachment created an environment of neglect and fear. For Kenyatta, this was life. A life where her cries were ignored, her needs dismissed, and her safety constantly at risk. Evelyn and Ulysses' relationship spiraled into chaos, and Kenyatta was caught in the middle. Ulysses' anger often turned toward her, and Evelyn, whether out of fear, indifference, or both, did little to intervene. The cycle of neglect and abuse continued, unchecked, until it reached its inevitable, tragic end. Their pasts shape their present, but they do not excuse it. Evelyn and Ulysses had choices that could have protected Kenyatta, saved her life. Instead, they became the very people who betrayed her trust, her innocence, and ultimately her future. Do you believe someone's past can justify their actions, or should they be held accountable regardless of what they've endured? How do we reconcile their struggles with the harm they caused? Let us know your thoughts. December 21, 1998. For most people in Millwood, Georgia, it was just another cold winter day. But for one man, a routine drive would lead to a discovery so horrifying it would stay with him forever. What started as an act of curiosity would unravel into one of Georgia's darkest mysteries. At first glance, it looked like nothing more than trash. An old abandoned TV console left to rot in the woods. But as the man leaned closer, he noticed something strange. Inside the console was a suitcase, heavy and sealed with concrete, as though someone had desperately tried to hide it. Why would someone seal a suitcase with concrete? The question weighed on him as he pried it open, his hands trembling despite the cold. What he found inside would haunt him for the rest of his life. Inside the gym bag, wrapped in a brown blanket, were the decomposed remains of a young girl. Her small frame spoke of innocence, but her presence there, hidden so deliberately, revealed something far more sinister. This wasn't an accident. This was an act of cruelty, of erasure. Someone had tried to make her disappear. The discovery sent shockwaves through the responding officers. Many of them had never encountered anything like it. Who was this little girl? Why had her body been encased in concrete and left in such a remote place? And most disturbingly, who had done this to her? The condition of her remains made it difficult to determine her age or cause of death. Initial estimates placed her at around 5 years old. Her body, though decomposed, bore no visible signs of shooting or stabbing, leaving investigators with even more questions. How did she die? And why was she hidden in such a calculated yet careless way? Whoever had placed her there had gone to great lengths to ensure she wouldn't be found. But why? Was it guilt, desperation, or something even darker? The answers wouldn't come easily, for now she was simply a nameless, voiceless victim, known only as Christmas Doe. How do you think someone would go to such extreme lengths to hide a child's body? Does this act suggest guilt, fear, or something far more sinister? For 35 years, the mystery of Christmas Doe remained unsolved, a question mark lingering over a life tragically cut short. But in 2023, everything changed. Advances in forensic science and a renewed commitment to uncovering the truth finally brought the answers that had eluded investigators for decades. The key to solving Kenyatta's case lay in her DNA, a piece of evidence so small yet so powerful. In the late 1980s, such technology didn't exist, but by 2023, forensic scientists were equipped with tools that could extract and analyze even the most degraded samples, reconstructing a genetic profile that would become the foundation for an extraordinary investigation. Through genome sequencing, experts built a comprehensive genetic profile for the girl known as Christmas Doe. Using forensic genealogy, a revolutionary tool, they cross-referenced her DNA with public databases, identifying distant relatives and creating a roadmap to her origins. For the first time, investigators had a clear direction. But the DNA provided the facts. It was her face that gave the world a glimpse of the girl behind the mystery. Forensic artists used advanced technology to digitally reconstruct her likeness, crafting a lifelike image of the child who had once been full of life. This was not just a scientific endeavor. It was an effort to return her humanity, to show the world the person she had been. Her face was everywhere. On social media, in newspapers, and on the evening news. For many, it was a heartbreaking image of a child lost too soon, but for one person, it was more than that. It was a memory, a name, and a chance to finally bring the truth to light. It only took one person to change the course of history. A tipster, moved by the reconstructed image, came forward with a story about a little girl named Kenyatta Odom, who had mysteriously disappeared decades ago in Albany, Georgia. Though the details were faint, their memory was enough to reignite the investigation. The tip gave investigators the connection they had been searching for. Using DNA testing, they compared Kenyatta's profile to the relatives identified through forensic genealogy. The results were conclusive. Christmas Doe was Kenyatta Odom, a 5-year-old girl who had been lost to the world for far too long. For decades she had no name, no voice, no identity. But now the world knew her as Kenyatta Odom. After years of silence, her story was no longer a mystery. She was no longer just a case. She was a person, a daughter, a child, who deserved justice. This case was different. It wasn't just about solving a mystery. It was about giving her back what had been taken from her: her name, her story, and her dignity. Finally, we could start seeking justice for Kenyatta. How do you feel about the role of technology in solving cases like Kenyatta's? Could advancements like DNA testing and forensic genealogy bring justice to other forgotten stories? Share your thoughts in the comments below. When Kenyatta's identity was finally confirmed, the spotlight shifted to those responsible for her death: her mother, Evelyn Odom, and Evelyn's boyfriend, Ulysses Sanders. Years of neglect and abuse, culminating in a deliberate effort to erase her existence, painted a damning picture. But now they could no longer hide from the truth. The case against Evelyn and Ulysses wasn't just built on DNA, it was built on years of tragedy. Investigators uncovered a chilling timeline of abuse, one that began long before Kenyatta's life was taken. Witness testimonies, medical records, and forensic evidence revealed the horrors she endured in her short life. For years, neighbors and community members had seen the signs: bruises that couldn't be explained, screams that echoed late into the night, and a little girl who seemed to grow quieter with each passing day. But no one intervened. And by the time anyone thought to act, it was already too late. Prosecutors allege that the abuse escalated over time, culminating in the tragic event that led to Kenyatta's death. Testimonies revealed that Ulysses had a violent temper, often directing his anger at the little girl. Evelyn, whether out of fear, indifference, or complicity, did nothing to stop him. On November 8, 2023, Evelyn Odom and Ulysses Sanders were formally charged with felony murder, first-degree child cruelty, aggravated battery, and concealing a death. The weight of their crimes left little room for mercy. Both were found guilty, facing life sentences for the pain and suffering they had inflicted. Though justice came decades too late, Kenyatta's story serves as a reminder that silence is complicity, that every child deserves to be seen and heard. Her memory is more than a tragedy, it's a symbol of resilience and the enduring fight for truth. What can we as a society do to prevent tragedies like this? How can we ensure no child's voice is ever silenced again? Share your thoughts below. It's time we all take action. Kenyatta Odom's story is one that demands to be remembered. For decades she was silenced, hidden and forgotten. But today we've brought her story back into the light, giving her the voice she deserved all along. While we may have found justice for Kenyatta, her tragedy reminds us that there are still countless children out there who need our help. Their voices are waiting to be heard, their stories waiting to be told. Her story teaches us a painful but important lesson, that we, as a society, have a responsibility to protect our children, to speak up when something feels wrong, to be vigilant and compassionate, and to never look the other way. The question is, what can we do to make sure no child ever falls through the cracks again? Kenyatta's story has moved you. Please consider taking action. Support organizations that fight for children's rights and provide resources for at-risk families. Learn the signs of abuse and neglect, and if you suspect something, speak up. It's better to act and be wrong than to stay silent. There are many ways to help. You can volunteer with local child advocacy groups, donate to organizations that provide critical resources to families in need, or simply stay informed. Every action, no matter how small, can save a life. If this story moves you, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to our channel, and turn on the bell notifications so that you'll never miss another story that matters. Sharing these stories helps amplify the voices of those who can no longer speak for themselves, and brings attention to the work that still needs to be done. Kenyatta's story doesn't end here. She has become a symbol, a reminder of the resilience of truth, the importance of justice, and the power of never giving up. Her legacy calls on us to ensure that no child is ever forgotten, no matter how much time has passed. Thank you for watching and for joining us in honoring A.J. Owen's life and legacy. We invite you to share your thoughts in the comments, like this video, and subscribe for more stories that matter. Together, we can make a difference. What can we do to ensure no child is ever forgotten or silenced again? What actions will you take to make a difference in your community? Share your thoughts below. Your voice matters.